Welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast, episode 139.
Greetings and welcome to the Comics Coffee Metal Podcast. I am your host, Don Cardenas. Today I'm joined by an amazing artist who I've been really wanting to have on the show for a long time. I've known Tom Fowler for, online at least, on Twitter for, he probably doesn't remember, but I remember having interactions with him for at least a decade ago. So almost a lifetime ago, really. But he is definitely one of those artists who I always enjoy seeing their work, and you've seen their work everywhere from Batman, the Hulk, Rick and Morty, Quantum and Woody, and of course his amazing creature designs and commissions. And you know, I have to say, Tom, that you draw the best creatures that I simultaneously want to like pet, but also know will kill me immediately.
Well,
so with all that said, Tom Fowler, welcome to the show.
Hello, Don. How are you? And how is everybody? Yeah, I mean, I like to think of the what I call affable space monsters that I draw to be just that. They're just very friendly guys that enjoy their jobs and just want to do it right. And so they're often on their way to or from their coffee break, but they're all having a good time. So I like to draw monsters that'll give you directions if you ask.
Yeah.
So
you know, one of my favorite books to have around the studio is your D&D collection of Dungeons and Dragons and Doodles. That again, it's just full of those. Like I was just looking at it again this afternoon, and I'm like, this is just full of so many amazing designs and really fun creatures. That again, I'm like, I want to pet that for some reason. Eat me.
Those ones I would
suck my bones out.
Yeah, those ones I would not pet. No.
Yeah.
Anything in the D&D universe is very likely to leave you dripping on the floor. But the ones in space, they're all great.
And speaking of D&D, you have an amazing new project coming out called GAMEMASTERS with the awesome Fred Van Lente, and I definitely want to ask you a whole bunch of questions about that. But first, I gotta ask, Comics Coffee Metal, what are you digging right now?
Well, as we discussed before, I have become a couple of years ago. I received this beautiful Italian coffee thing. Oh, for my wife for Christmas, and I love this thing. I love it. I used a French press forever because I'm the only coffee drinker in the house, so I don't need a coffee maker, a big thing going through the day. And I loved my French press. I went through 2 or 3 different carafes because the glass ones are garbage, right? So my wife eventually bought me a stainless steel one that you could whip down the stairs, and that thing's nothing's happening. You're doing more damage to your stairs, but the actual this thing on the top, started to go. And I can buy replacement parts, but that would require me actually having the admin skills to go and measure what I actually need. So I just kept using it, and it kept kind of coming loose, and eventually Monique bought me one of these boys, which basically makes about a cup and a quarter. And I grind my little Sumatran beans, and I put them in this guy. I fill that up with water, cold water, screw it all back together, and stick it on the stove to boil. And when it starts burbling, I turn off the stove, and it's ready. And it's a steam effect that goes through the coffee, so it's a lot more like espresso. And indeed, the beans I'm using in it right now are espresso beans, but I'm a big proponent of the old Turkish adage, black as hell, strong as death, and sweet as love. So it makes the perfect cup. And I've tried doing a second cup over the course of the day, and I'm like, no, I can't do that.
What is the exact name of that kind of brewer? Because I don't think anyone's ever
it is
just a stovetop
Grosche, so Grosche. I believe it's Italian, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to look it up because I'm like, no one's really had one of those on. And for the people listening to the audio only version, it looks like it's a.
It looks like a little transformer. Yeah, it looks like a little Italian transformer.
It's really cool looking. Though. It's Well, thank you for sharing. You already answered the other question I was going to have. Like, what kind of beans do you like? What kind of roasts do you do? And,
I've gotten to honestly, I buy my coffee at Costco, so it's not that kind of la.
I mean, there's definitely some.
There's some great stuff at Costco. Yeah. So now what's going in there is La Crema, which I'm not sure who makes it or from what, but when they don't have that, I get the Sumatran blend that's there, and it's just nice, and it's not too bitter. It's very dark, but it's not crazy bitter. And it's just really nice. I grill, as I said, I've got my own grinder, which I've had for the last decade or so since I got the French press. So that's a nice little kind of thing to do every morning, just to try and wake up and find little things that are actually have a real outcome when I'm procrastinating before I get to, it's better to do that than scroll through my phone, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. What kind of grinder? Is it like a blade grinder, or is it a burr grinder?
Yeah, it's like a little, I should have brought that down. It's a little electric, it's not. I think we just got a Canadian Tire. It's like a little $20 jobby. It looks like one of those bullet things, The reservoir in it is about that big, and it's just got two blades that go around. But I'm on my second one because again, I dropped the first one.
I've brought this up on the past few episodes, but I will keep bringing it up because I have to recommend it. If in the next time you're in the market for another grinder. I know coffee. I have one that's a Coffee Mate one. It's a burr grinder.
Okay.
And it was about $60 because I'd gone through those hand blade ones or whatever. I've gone through like two of them, and and there's an immediate difference with just how much better the coffee tastes that way.
Oh, really? Okay.
Now the one I got, my wife and I, we both drink coffee, so I'm, but it's nice. The one we got is it's a little chamber, and you can set how many cups you want, you're going to brew, and it'll grind that much into the chamber.
Oh, okay. So it's just one that you pour the coffee in, and then
you put the beans in the top, and the rest,
and you just leave them there for however long, and then you just hit whatever button.
You press the button.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'll fill up a couple days worth at a time. Pop it in there, and then we tested it, and I think if I put it down for 13 cups I'm brewing, but I'm actually brewing 12 cups of water or whatever, that's the ratio that works for us.
Okay.
But it matched up pretty well. But that's nice because usually in the mornings, especially if I go to the gym in the morning, I come back, I take the dog out in the backyard or whatever, but before I do that, I just press the button, it starts grinding the beans. By the time I come back in, they're all ready to go. Pop it in the coffee maker, and it's good to go. But I definitely noticed a huge flavor improvement that I wasn't expecting just with this change of the grind. And I follow some fancy coffee people on YouTube.
So what is a burr grinder then?
It's like gears.
Okay, that's what I figured. Yeah,
kind of smashing it together.
You know what? My wife actually bought me a hand crank for Christmas last year. I still haven't used it because it's the thing itself is fairly narrow cylinder.
Yeah.
But the crank is this long, and so you're holding a little, and you're doing this like you're turning a school bus.
It's essentially what it is. Yeah, it's just a motorized version of that.
And I might, if I can find a small enough one, I may do that. Right now, it's more of a counter space concern.
Yeah.
Because as I said, since I'm the only one, anything I want for me has to be able to sit far back on a very high shelf. So little things, are good. But
we have a galley kitchen, so it's just like a hallway. So counter space.
Yeah, but again, but you're both drinking. You're both using it. You're both using those things.
I totally get the anything, because there's a few kitchen, because I do majority of the cooking in the house and all that. So there's definitely lots of like gadgets or like different coffee things that I want to get.
Yeah.
That, you know, I'm like, we don't have the space for this, so I can't get it.
Years ago, my wife and I just celebrated our 20th anniversary. But I think even before we were married, when we were living together, my wife bought me an espresso machine, and it was like this. It wasn't. I mean, again, it wasn't like some huge apparatus, but it was big, and it just kind of sat unused for most of the, like every so often Monique would get a little head of steam, so to speak, and say, would you like an espresso? And I'd be like, yeah, sure. And we do that, but after a while it's just like it's this huge thing that sits behind the sink and on a little shelf behind the sink, but could we be using that space for something else, maybe, which sucks, because I like the little cups and I like the little spoons and all that stuff, but it's just like, if it's just for me, like even my mother-in-law drinks coffee, but and they live in town now, but they used to stay with us all the time when they were out of town. But so in the mornings, it was always kind of I'd have to make a pot for her and a pot for me. Because what I drink is nuclear grade compared to what she drinks. Well, she's a former nurse, right? So she's used to like that kind of drinking that
whatever
kind of
hot
medium
liquid was available.
Exactly, like medium coffee throughout the day, kind of thing, just to get yourself through, right? So, and for me, I just can't. I can't do that. I'm that. I have literally sent coffee back in restaurants. Being like, I don't know if this is just how you do this, but this is black water. Can I have something that's not just black water, please?
And I'll be honest, like I can't recall last time I had good coffee at a restaurant. I can't. Like at like any type of like non-coffee centric place.
It's got to be a place that's got the real machines. Like there used to be a place in town there. We would go every so often. When you got a coffee, you knew it was good because when it came, it had the foam on top, like from the cup. You know what I mean, like that espresso foam. Yeah. And you're always like, "Oh, you did it right, didn't you?" And it was great, Nice. But 9 times out of 10, when you're getting something, I live in Canada too. It's the home of Tim Hortons, which is the most garbage coffee in the world, right? So it's hard to. You go in and you're ordering like, could I get a dark roast double with a shot of espresso in it, please, so it tastes like coffee?
So. Being in the Midwest of the States, I'm kind of surrounded by a lot of really great roasters. So there you go. I'm in Illinois, so there's a few, in the area, especially around Chicago. And there's some in Wisconsin that are really good, and there's one in Michigan that I really love called Rootless. And so for me, for my wife and I, it's really easy to find just relatively affordable good coffee. Good roasted coffee.
There's a really good local roaster called Happy Goat that have moved. It started. I remember I would bump into the guy at farmers markets. Years ago, and we would just chat as I, put my coffee together, kind of thing. But he would just kind of sell bags that he'd done. Yeah. And now there, and then there was like a one kind of main store, coffee shop, and then there was another, and now they're moving into a lot of locations that Starbucks has abandoned, and they're just so much better. So. Which is nice to see, because it's it's local growth, and it's a good, like I talked to the guy that did it. He was a good dude, so when you can, you want to support those people. So
we're about like 35-40 miles north of Chicago, so there's, and our town's relatively small, so there's not really any like cool cafes that we can go to easily in our town, but my parents still live in Chicago, so whenever I go down there with the kids, like it's within a stone's throw of my parents' house. There's like 3 different like nice coffee places that I'm like, I gotta go here. Just,
I'm not quite that bad.
Yeah. My wife and I are just like like we just want to have that option. Just go sit at a cafe somewhere.
Yeah, oh yeah,
it's like,
or out front, or
but it's all Starbucks or whatever. Like,
have the dog sit at your feet and just kind of
you know,
read or write or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. You know, take a nice walk somewhere or whatever. But you know, and I go to Starbucks often, but I never get coffee. I
can't imagine getting anything else there. Everything else is so horrible. I mean, food wise, everything there is terrible. Beverage wise, there are a couple of good things, but yeah.
The only thing I like there food wise, even is it isn't even something like that's specific to them. They just have it. There's like the lemon loaf cake thing they have. But you can get that at the supermarket.
No, you can get it everywhere. Yeah, exactly.
It's the same shit. And you have to pay, 3 times the price for it at Starbucks. Exactly. So I'm enjoying this in-depth coffee chat. And anyone can talk about anything as much as they want, or or as little as they want. And sometimes it's like, I drink this. I'm like, okay, But I like just getting nerdy about coffee a bit, just because it's better than asking you.
Asking me to get nerdy about any of the minutia of my life or work is, as I was saying before we got on, I'm not diagnosed yet, but I'm fairly certain I'm about a sneeze away from being autistic. So I'm on the spectrum. I've had that, at least that done kind of thing, but I am so ready to kind of like just what little thing I've got friends who whenever we meet, we spend 3 hours talking about paper, just paper, and the next time we meet, we'll spend 3 hours talking about ink, just ink, and it's just, it's a weird, relaxing kind of thing, especially if you become a nerd about it. Cause there was a point at which I had really great art store that was pushing various different things that weren't just Strathmore or whatever. So I'm like carrying around it's this Italian paper. They've been making it for 400 years. It's incredible, and it was great. And people would be like, what do you do this on? It's Italian paper, and I've got, in my studio, the same place, in the 60s, well, from the 50s on, Ottawa has always been fairly animation heavy, and really from the 50s up. And it started there was a small studio called Crawley, later Hinton. It might have been the other way around. But and one of the shows they made early on was, I think it was done in the late 60s, but it was this very simple animated show, Wizard of Oz show. Very simple, very that kind of late Warner Brothers, when it was all like very kind of shapy, Okay. So the art store that the art supply store that I used to go was also a gallery, and they had an art show by the director of that show. And so he had a bunch of so he put up like a bunch of cells from the show. It was amazing. But he also brought them this giant ream of paper, because one of the other industries in this town there was a paper plant called E.B. Eddy. And the paper plant had made paper specific for that animation studio. Oh. And so you get nowhere else, and had this like really natural yellowing patina, like it had off-gassed for 50 years in this dude's basement. Yeah. So it was acid free. And what I would do is I would go down, and the store would sell sheets for like 25 cents, $1, whatever. I would go and they were big sheets. They were like 25 by 40. And I would buy 10 sheets, cut them up so I could get 8 pages per sheet, and then go down to like Staples or whatever and just get it spiral bound. And so I now had an 80-page sketchbook on really nice paper for $8, $10 after the binding kind of thing. And awesome. It was great. And then until they ran out. And then like a year later, the same guy called them up and said, like, I found another ream of this stuff. You want it? And the store called me up and said, Tom, you're the only person who ever bought this stuff. $200? And I was like, yes. And I still have a huge box of it,
Oh, nice. I was gonna say, like, they just immediately just call you, Tom.
Yeah, well, I mean, they knew.
Just come get it.
Yeah. But exactly. Well, come get it. We'll help you because this thing weighs a fuck ton. Yeah, no, it was great. It's those kinds of things, and like I would eventually, like, I got to a point with it too where I started like telling people, like I'd show people at cons and stuff. I'd show them my sketchbook, and and again, like artists do this. They start like they're flipping through your sketchbook, and they're like, "Oh, this is really great. What's this paper?" Kind of thing. And they're just feeling it, and because it was really nice and soft and smooth, but like it was really smooth, but it was really soft, and it was like a lot of cotton, and it was great stuff. And it'd be like, what is this? And so like the next year when I came down, I'd come down with like watches of paper for people. So like, try this out. It's really cool.
That's awesome. No,
first one's free.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
I'm, I have ADHD myself. I get the hyperfixation thing. I get the whole thing. My whole house
comfort in minutia.
Yeah. The whole household is pretty much what you would call neurospicy. We got
mine too.
We got various levels of things happening, so we definitely get into it. Paper is definitely something that I don't have like ultra like specific stuff, but like I do have I mostly work digitally now, but when I do work on paper, I do have a preference. I have that.
Yeah.
I used to really love the Strathmore 500 plate. That used to be my jam, but it's so uneven now. With what
Strathmore went straight into the toilet about 15 years ago.
I tried some.
Although I still work on this stuff.
Yeah,
for all the 400.
For some reason, no matter what, the 300, it's never like it's always just like, it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It's good for what I needed to do, right? And the DC. I actually asked the last time DC actually sent me paper. I asked my editor, like, what is this? Like, can you tell me what the actual brand of paper is? And it's the Strathmore 400 that they use now. The 400 is like the one grade that you have to cut down because they don't do the 11 by 17 sheets of it. Which is fair enough. The next project I'm working on is actually a European series of bande dessinée, and my printer for blue lines can take paper that's up to 13 inches wide. So I'm going to be working 13 by 17 or whatever it is. And you can buy that stuff in 14 by 17. So I just have to cut an inch off the side, and I'm good.
There you go.
But
I tried this brand called Eon.
Yeah, I actually reached out to Eon because I had a lot of friends who were going like, Eon's amazing. And I don't want to, I may have just gotten a bad batch, so I don't want to shit on anybody.
I feel like paper is kind of one of those things where it's like, even like the most consistent ones, like there still can be just
exactly. But so I actually reached out to them and I said like, hey, could you send me a couple samples? And they were great. And they sent it to me. There's still a ton of people using this stuff. What I found with it was that it was super thirsty, and I couldn't maintain any kind of a black line on it. Everything went straight to gray because it all just got sucked in, and it was like working on like the cover stock you would buy at a copy store. That's what it felt like. And again, hopefully it was just a bad batch because I know, Louis LaRosa absolutely loves them. There's like a bunch of friends of mine that work on it and swear by it, and it's great. So hopefully I just got a bad batch, but I just wound up going back to, yellow cover bullshit paper, and I'll keep using it until I can't anymore. Then I'll find something else. But the next two projects I'm on, like as I said, the next one I'm on, I'm going to be, working at a larger size. Yeah. So I'll be able to looking at other, but just, I still have to maintain a certain speed. So I don't want to get too weird with it. But the next project after that, if it feels good to work on the side of a tree, I will. Because of the approach I want to be taking with that book, Okay. So
No, I totally get it. It's, my experience with the Eon boards, like I just been using them for commissions, and that's mainly why I try to like at least try to get a quote unquote nicer paper, because I'm like, well, it's for commission, so
Yeah, I mean, as long as what you're using is acid free, I think it's fine.
But yeah, now that you mentioned like the thirstiness of it, I think I kind of experienced a bit of that. Now, the commissions I worked on that specific paper on, there wasn't a ton of like heavy blacks, so I didn't notice that. But I do have a couple I have to work on that will, so I'm wondering if I'm going to have that experience or not. But like you said, like the yellow 300 series Strathmore Bristol.
I mean, one way or another, I mean, Strathmore, for all of its faults, it's still acid free, right? So and that's my only. It's one of the only things I still kind of stick by with my old kind of art school snobbiness is that if I'm gonna use a product, I want to make sure it's light, fast, and acid free. Just so if I sell an original, it'll be around at least as long as I am. I mean, once I'm dead, I don't care. But I don't want it to fade in my lifetime. I don't want it to. I don't want it to crumble. I remember I got a sketch years ago. I used to get sketches from people at shows just before I'd kind of broken in, and one dude. I got this absolutely beautiful headshot from Dan Klaus that he'd done with very delicate pencil line, but it was absolutely beautiful. He sat like 10 feet away from me and kind of put a shoulder around to draw it and then gave it back to me. I don't think he said 2 words to me. He was a lovely person, but it was just, I think that's just Dan, right? And it was in San Diego, and I can't imagine that the bells and whistles of going on like made him the least bit comfortable. And also, I'm 6'5" and I look like this, so it's not. It doesn't put a lot of people at ease. But the next person who I didn't even ask them for a sketch. They just did one, and they did it with a Sharpie. And about a month later, when I was looking through that book, because I'd gotten a bunch of stuff, the Sharpie drawing had bled 2 pages in either direction with just yellow garbage all over it, and I was just like, I was just like, okay, so I'm never going to be guilty of that. I'm never going to do that to anyone, like that thing. So, as long as it brings to mind like all those Gil Kane drawings. Gil Kane that are just gone. The Toth now. The same with Toth.
And it's like they didn't care because they're like, this is his work. I'm just getting work done. But to us, it's like, oh my god, these pieces of history are just like disappearing.
Yeah.
And it's nuts. But it's just working in sketchbooks like alone. I am so paranoid about screwing up, like having anything bleed through. So whenever I do get a sketchbook commission at a show, I'm like,
you put that little thing underneath
2 layers of Bristol under it just to make sure I'm not screwing anyone else.
The thing drives me nuts though is somebody will always like bring you a sketchbook and the cover looks really nice, but the paper is garbage. There were a couple for a few years that like a few people had, and I kept, I do the sketch and I would do my best because I do a lot of, like when I'm at cons and stuff, I do a lot of ink wash, I do a lot of painting. Watercolors and gouache and things like that, and invariably because I'm doing that, they'll ask for it, kind of thing. But there was this one brand, I can't remember what it was, but it looked like watercolor paper. The cover was like this is an art book, kind of thing. And I tried to do, I would try to do my thing, and then it was just me trying to fix every little thing. Like it would just absorb in exactly the wrong way, and it would warp like crazy, and it wouldn't, and so when I would hand it back to people, I would be like, okay, real talk, this is a bad sketchbook. I did my best. Here's Amazon. These are good. This is bad. Keep the stuff. Cut the pages out of this that you like, but then throw it in the toilet because this is toilet paper. Buy one of these,
It's for their own good. You want that?
Well, exactly. Like they want a good sketch. You want to give them a good sketch.
Quality material in there. Yeah, there was an instance in a convention not too far long ago where it was one of those like small little ones. And he's wanted a quick sketch or whatever, and it was a real nice guy. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And he's like, oh, I'll come back later. And I was drawing it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do a little extra. I'm just gonna toss some color on here for fun or whatever. And I use the Tombow markers, the paint markers, and all that. So you can do a bit of blending with them and stuff like that. And I wasn't thinking, and this is where we're going. So I'm like tearing into this paper, and I'm like, oh shit, like I should have just kept this as inks. Thankfully, I was able to salvage it enough to where like it looked fine, but you could definitely tell like I abused that paper. And then there was recently at a show, there was someone brought a sketchbook and they wanted me to do a color one, and I just looked at it and I instantly am like, I can't do color on this. Like I'm gonna tear through this paper. Like this is not gonna be good. So then he just ended up. Thankfully, he just said like, oh, you could do it on a separate piece of paper. I'm like, yes, I can.
Yeah,
and that's what happened.
Well, it's the thing. So, like I always bring my own paper just in case,
Yeah.
But also the other thing.
Because I have a little cutter that I bring with me at the shows. I'm like, I'll cut it to the size of the sketchbook if you want to keep it in the sketchbook for whatever reason. But like, he's like, oh no, it's fine. I'm like, all right, cool.
My other real bugaboo these days are those the sketch covers, because I don't know. Like I'm sure you've had to wrestle with one of those damn things.
Oh yeah.
The blank covers. I don't know why they would not ask any artist in their employ what kind of paper should we use with it, because half the time they have like a sheen over. You know what I mean? Like they've got like some kind of weird from running through the presses kind of thing. Presumably from the printing press, so they've got that kind of oil treatment over top, and they resist everything. And a friend of mine taught me to, Nick Bradshaw taught me to, the first thing you do is you just take your white vinyl eraser and you just go over the whole thing to at least bring up a little, to remove, that oil, presumably, but also to bring the tooth up a little bit. Okay. But I found ways to, I look at it from a lot of the time, I look at it from the perspective of you're kind of buying an experience. If you're commissioning somebody, especially at a show, you can't really necessarily ask them to produce the same that they would in their office at home. Yeah. So I kind of lean into that a little bit, and things get a little bit wilder. And what I will often do is I will open the whole book, so I have the whole front and back cover. And if I can, I try to do kind of a gag, so that you can still look at it just the front, and it's still your drawing of Spider-Man, right? Yeah. But if you open up the back, it's Spider-Man and Mysterio, and there's an interplay that that tells a story of some kind. Yeah. But in doing that, I have learned to kind of beat that paper. If I'm painting it, I've learned to like beat that paper into submission. And I just let it do whatever it's going to do, and I just keep going at it. And I I will destroy these things. They'll look great. Like I'm not, I'm doing my best, and I'm trying to make it look as good as possible. And I'm always happy when the final product, but there will be pages from the middle missing. There'll be, and that's going to happen no matter what, because I'm sliding it around to get the right, thing.
Yeah, you ain't gonna read this anymore, but who cares?
Exactly. It's like, and the image will be great. The painting will look tactile, shall we say? But it will look good. People are always happy, but every time I hand it back to them, it's like, don't get this slabbed. I just brought it down several grades. Don't get this slabbed, because the other thing too is you're not going to be able to see that interplay. Like if you really want to put it under glass or whatever the hell, go to IKEA, go to Michael's, buy like a $5 frame, put it under plexiglass. Your aces,
thankfully I haven't done too many sketch covers, and recently, like, I've just been doing ones for my own book, and we get those printed from Kablam or whatever. But like the covers, the blank cover stock on there is actually pretty decent. Like it's not, it's nothing to write. It's, you know, probably not.
Yeah, I mean, 9 times out of story,
but it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's like I said, it's like copy shop cover stock. You know, like you can usually, this is a cougar, you know, and do whatever, right? So it's fair enough. You just need to know how to, kind of, like I say, you need to know how to beat it into submission. And I think a lot of that stuff too is kind of made for markers as opposed to brushes and quills and things like that. And that's the other side of it, because I'm this kind of guy. So you get the heavier materials and all that. But I do respect the point of view of like, I'm not gonna change you cover, but I'm still gonna make you better. You're gonna remember me.
We're gonna do this the hard way.
Yeah, you're gonna 20 years from now, you're gonna be in a bar and you're gonna tell a horrible story to somebody.
Oh, nice. And, you know, true to form, we've had a nice long digression into paper quality.
Yep.
To try to steer it back a little back. You mentioned when we were emailing back and forth about you coming on the show that you got some prog rock you'd like to talk about. So I had a lot of prog rock mentions on here. So
I was never
see what you got.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm now 50 years old. I am, I suppose, at the time I wasn't Gen X, but apparently now I am. And because none of that makes any sense, and it's all bullshit.
I don't know if I don't know what.
But I came of age. I went through high school in the late 80s, early 90s, right? So, most of what was available to me metal-wise was the last days of hair metal, which wasn't even glam rock anymore, because I could get down to some glam rock, but that kind of, Poison and what none of it did anything for me. And so, there were a couple of bands here and there, and we were still also riding this wave of our parents, boomer generation, still proselytizing, however that's said, the 60s, and all, that's the real music. And the thing is too, it's like all of those artists were only 20 years older. They were as old then as I am now. In fact, they were younger then than I am now. Like the Stones were in their 40s, and so they were still producing things, and we were still in this kind of like, well, do we have a thing? And is this the only thing we have? Is it just Poison, kind of thing? And I had friends who were into like Megadeth and stuff, and some of it's great. But there was never anything there. The closest I would get was Led Zeppelin, which I still love, and Floyd, which I still. And that's not heavy metal. Frankly, it's prog, And around that time, and this was, before grunge really hit, I think I was in junior high, I discovered Yes. Partially because I remembered their 80s resurgence, because Owner of a Lonely Heart was my favorite song when I was like 8. That sounds like a Pepe. Who doesn't like Yes, which is a good start in life. But Owner of a Lonely Heart was my favorite song when I was 8, and around that time, somebody had given me, when I turned 11, I think somebody gave me a Roger Dean art book, and of course Roger Dean was the painter that did all of the Yes album covers, and was largely in Avatar, everything visually that's cool, that was all plagiarized from Roger Dean.
Okay.
So he did all this stuff, and I was just like, I couldn't believe, I absolutely adored it. And I was like, wait a minute, I know this band. They did that Owner of a Lonely Heart thing. And so I wound up kind of going back, because they started in like 69 or whatever, and I started kind of working my way through the 70s. And as I did that, all of these bands just kind of spread off and did other things. And I was into that. I've never, it's one, like I said, it's like the fascination with minutia or whatever, like, but I just kind of, I glommed onto it, and I was like, well, what's this guy's band? What did they do? And 9 times I kind of hated it. Like, there's all sorts of other prog that I could not stand. Yeah. I can't deal with like Peter Gabriel Genesis. You know, I can't deal with. Yeah. I have tried to get into King Crimson. I like some of it. You know, but and even with Yes, there are albums that I'm like, no, thank you. You know, I got to a point in the early 2000s where I actually got rid of most of my collection, because I'm not going to listen to any of this stuff anymore. You know? And it wasn't until 8 or 9 years ago that I started buying it again, but only kind of selected things. There's like for at the very least for Yes, there's like 3 or 4. As far as I'm concerned, they've got like 3 or 4 really good albums. And then it's your mileage may vary, you know, and they've got a couple of just absolute stinkers, you know. So there's like the Yes album, Close to the Edge, Fragile, and maybe some of Relayer. Okay. You know. That was the one where they had a different keyboard guy, Patrick Moraz, who would pretty much just lay on top of the organ and just roll around. And it's not necessarily my favorite. It's like Relayer is one of those, your mileage may vary, but things like Tales from Topographic Oceans, it's like, oh my God, it's a 2-album thing. It's a beautiful album cover. Beautiful. That's where it ends. And it's a lot of kind of half songs that go nowhere. And you're like, if you had dug down and actually taken this one song, like this 3-minute bit of this song, and expanded it into something more interesting, like this would be great. But you've just kind of done these 3 minutes, and now you're on to the next 3 minutes, and like you're not getting it, guys. Like this isn't, you know, like you're not recapturing. You're not recapturing Close to the Edge. you're getting further and further away, and that's the album where everybody just kind of split off. That's where I believe that's when Bruford left. That's when Wakeman left. That's when, you know, they were just going to like, fuck this noise. I can't deal with this shit anymore. John's driving me nuts. You know. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm pretty well versed with their entire catalog at this stage, and there's some great stuff in there, and there's some great weird kind of B-sides that are great. But yeah, that was more and from there I went into jazz, and I didn't really, I loved when I was in high school. At the same time, I was loving grunge music. I loved like Pearl Jam and various other things, and but yeah, I somehow I always kept coming back to that, and I can appreciate a lot of that, and I can call a lot of it kind of wank, and I can appreciate some of the wank. You know, and I would never ever make somebody else, you know, it's not something. For instance, I have a 16-year-old, right, and you know, when he was 8 years old, I showed him The Taking of Pelham 123. You know, I showed him Master and Commander. I showed him, in fact, at some point very soon, I'm going to be showing him Charlie Varick. You know, like there are things that I will curate for him, and I will very happily, you know, pass along, even if I don't know that he's going to necessarily dig it. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not
give you your best shot.
Exactly. I'm not going to, and I'm never going to be like, you should like this. Like, it was never one of those Star Wars dads. It's like, you have to like this, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But with any of this, like, the bullshit music that I was into, I'm never going to do that too, because I know I'm a menace. Like, you know, and it was things like when I was in high school, I had no idea. I had no idea. Like, my friends were listening to like skater music and ska and punk and the early days of kind of the new wave hip hop that was coming out around that time, in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was like, and it didn't. Some of it I liked, but I kept going back to the thing that made me comfortable, which was this garbage. And so it took me a while to kind of exit that, but somehow I just kept, pass lead back. But now it's a much more kind of curated, like, I know I'm not going to go into any kind of deep dives of whatever. And nowadays, a lot of, really the only times I'm listening to music at all, really, is when I'm writing nowadays, or when I'm laying out a comic, because I can't, most of the time I listen to podcasts or I listen to audiobooks when I'm working. But I can't do that when I'm writing, and I can't do that when I'm laying things out, because for all intents and purposes, I'm writing, because that's what layout is. And so what I will go back to are the things that I've listened to so many times that they just become these kind of tonal waves that wash over me. So, I'll listen to Animals by Pink Floyd for, 5 times in a row, and it's just sounds after a while. I'll listen to Close to the Edge. I'll listen to honestly, I'll listen to Crosby, Stills and Nash. Like, there's a lot of stuff from that time when I was in high school, and I listened to these records to death, that it's a comfort. It's not bad music, but it's a thing that puts me into a mindset that I can, like, it's enough stimulation that I have it, kind of thing. Yeah. But not so much that I need to pay attention to it. Yes. Because I'm already on my way through it, kind of thing. Because I already know it so well. And then I can, sit down and blast through whatever's on my iPad. So
there's been some recent studies where they basically confirmed that, like, music you've listened to, like, in your teen years while your brain's still developing and all that, like, you're never gonna it
imprints on you
past that. It's on you. And I consider myself fairly lucky in that, in the past 10 years or so, I've been able to, like, kind of, like, I don't even know if I've even expanded what I like. More like I'm embracing everything that I thought I shouldn't like, or because I'm 41 going on 42, so I'm not too far removed from you. Like,
well, you don't have to worry about somebody making fun of you, in math class. Like it's like, it doesn't matter anymore. And so now I'm like, anything that comes across my desk, I don't care if it's Taylor Swift, I don't care if it's hip hop, I don't care what it is. It's good. If I like it, it's good, kind of thing. Yeah. Bands I got into after, like, my in my 40s and things like that are bands like the New Pornographers or Metric, or that had particularly with the New Pornographers, it was weird. It was a weird, for me at least, some of the things that I loved about the prog that I was listening to, with that it was catchy, but it had these intricate bits in it. Yeah. I think the New Pornographers are better than any of that stuff, but they still have that really well-constructed intricacy that goes through. But they're also songs you just are fun to listen to, that you just really dig, and they're better written. No one's ever, like, lyrically, nobody has ever written a good prog song. They're all bad. They're all terrible. They make no sense.
I'm not a huge prog guy myself, but I dabble here and there. But kind of something you said really, like, hit the nail on the head of, like, why I have trouble with it, and that's, like, 3 minutes in, you're like, oh, okay, I like this, and then it's just like, there's an entirely different direction they go to. Yeah, and they are more in the metal side, but like Dream Theater, like they're a band that I like a lot of their stuff, but so much of it, like, ends up falling flatter for me because they go into that, like.
Yeah, they start noodling.
The good going here, and all of a sudden it stops, and then the keyboard player is doing some, like, jaunty, almost like carnival-esque thing happening, and I'm like, okay,
Yeah, a friend of mine used to make fun of a friend of mine and I used to make fun of Jethro Tull, doing stuff like that, where it's just like, it starts okay, but then it's like the guy starts singing about tippity top with the horse's hooves on the drawbridge, kind of thing. And you're just like, fuck off, But this is the thing, on something like Close to the Edge, because all these bands have these, they have these images of themselves as being kind of classical musicians to some degree, right? And that's the pretense. We're going to make, we're not just going to make a pop song. We're going to make a concerto. We're going to make we're going to do a larger thing. We're going to do Beethoven's Fifth, 20 minutes long, that will have movements and crescendos, but it will always come back to, it'll all mesh together, right?
Yeah.
And for a thing like Close to the Edge, it does that because it manages to take you on the whole of the journey, but it doesn't get lost in that, and it doesn't go to a different place. It does, but it always comes back, and it all fits. You feel like you've done, whatever the equivalent of, and I'm not super articulate with music, but whatever the equivalent of that, a longer work by, Beethoven or whoever the hell, right? It does that. It does that kind of thing. But when it sucks, when they really get it wrong, is when they have those pretensions, but it doesn't tie back together, right? Yeah. And so then you just get this kind of noodling art school bullshit of well, I'm going to do a little thing here, and then I'm going to do a little thing here, and I'm going to do a little thing here. Aren't I different? And it doesn't mesh together, and that's when it's at its worst, and that's when it drives me nuts, and that's when that's Tales from Topographic Oceans, right? That's the problem with that. It's 3 minutes of something that could have been good if you tied it back, or you returned to it, or you developed it more. But no, it's just an idea you had, and you put it together with another idea you had, and another idea you had, and it doesn't. None of it meshes in the way that you want it to musically, not just narratively or anything else. Just musically, it's a mess. And a lot of those bands just kind of fell into that trap. That it's got to be long and it's got to be pretentious. Sweet, and let me roll around on this organ a little bit. Let me see if I can hit every note.
At some point, one of us has to show off exactly how good we are.
Exactly, yeah. We're all virtuosos. We'll all get it a little bit, and that's fine. But you have to. It's like in comics. You have to be everybody's good at what they do, but your main job is telling the story, right? Yeah. You've got to, it's not whether or not the audience digs it. That's not necessarily it. It's that you told the best story you possibly could with all the tools you have, right? Yeah. And sometimes that means cutting. Sometimes that means killing your babies. But sure. you can save that baby for another time. You're fine. Just store that away. Stop smoking so much. Store that away and bring it back when you've got time to actually focus and work on it and develop it. But when you just chop it all and throw it together, it's just salad. It's just soup, and it's not. It's bad. And I found, and weirdly, I have the same kind of, because I've barely even dabbled, but I find that I've started doing these fake death metal or black metal logos for things. I did one for my son because he loves brie, the cheese. Okay. So I did I did a death metal brie shirt for him for Christmas, and it's available on my Threadless. Black metal soft cheese. And I did another one recently for the Flophouse podcast. Because Stuart Wellington's a friend of mine. Both he and Elliot are into black metal and stuff. And I was talking to Stuart, and I was like, well, black metal's just prog rock. It really is. If you're going to go out there dressed like an orc and start singing about slaying dwarves,
it's I find, you know, some people as they get older, like their music tastes kind of like chill out a bit. Mine seems to be getting more extreme. Because I was never really into like death metal or black metal or even like the harsh guttural vocal things. But now some of my favorite bands are that. But no, what you said is exactly true. And it's the same rules apply. Like if you're when they're doing stuff and it's going on just like too long, or they're like trying to make it,
look how many notes I can play
the mold of a thing
in 2 seconds.
Look how fast we can do this blast beat. Look how fast we can. It's just like yawn. I don't care.
Yeah, and when you get lost in the weeds of the surface detail of what you're doing, like this is black metal, so this is what it has to sound like. This is ska, so this is what it has to sound like. This is punk, where punk is fuck. This is what it has to sound like. You lose track of what you're actually trying to say or do, right? And it's a problem that exists across all creative industries. And I don't want to paint anybody with any kind of brush. So it's like everybody's got their own, whatever. But it is a trap that people fall into. Of like, well, what do people want from us? It's got to be this. What have we been successful at in the past? It's got to be this. What are the tropes or the trappings of the medium we're working in? Well, they've got to be this, and you can get lost in that and kind of lose the through line, and it's the through line that really makes any of this stuff any good,
for sure.
So
it's really easy to do that, especially with music and all that. I don't want to, stay on music too long. There's so much other stuff we talk about. But, I've been trying, for people who aren't like super into metal who come on the show, like I'm trying to find some way to like bring you a little bit more in. So, what's like if you had to say like, what's like the heaviest band you're like, yeah, I could listen to this a lot?
It's hard to say. I think I've heard some stuff from Mastodon that I really like.
Okay.
I like something that's like, what I like is, and this isn't metal, but it makes it illustrates the point a little bit. The BC song "Sabotage"? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Everybody knows it, but there's a kind of clang to it. There's a kind of loose gear, meat falling off the bone. Quality to it, but it still has a driving rhythm, and it still has enough intricacy in it to make it interesting. That's what I dig. Like, I think I like a heavy bass line that isn't, accompanied by, kind of thing. I like to see, I like melody, but I like choppy melody. I like, you know what I mean? Like, I like that kind of meat falling off the bone kind of thing when I'm listening to rock. Right. And so that's where I'm at with a lot of those things. Right.
Do you like The Sword at all?
I don't know that I've heard them. Okay.
But
keep in mind, I'm not much of a music guy. Like I'm really not. Most of for the last few years, like for a number of years, my radio station was my best friend because he was a music guy. Then it was just kind of, then I had CBC3, which was the online new music version of the CBC, which was fantastic until they completely shit the bed. And so I was getting introduced to all sorts of different kind of new things, like on all parts of the spectrum kind of thing. But I don't have a lot of friends who are sharing music with me, kind of thing anymore. And it's certainly not top 40 radio. Right. So I'm not hearing a lot of it. So it's a lot of it's one of those things that if somebody's like, I think you might like this, I literally write it down on a little notepad because I have no memory. And then I try and find it on YouTube. And if I dig it, I dig it. And if I don't, I don't,
Well, I'll be happy to send you some links.
Absolutely.
To stuff, but just off the top of my head, just to get it out. I think from what I'm getting is vibe is kind of important to you, just like the general feeling of stuff. And I think the Sword is something, probably they're not like super metal, they're definitely more on the doomier stoner side, but they're not really like
they're not Fish.
Even in stuff like Baroness that would fit that more stoner type stuff. But if you're looking for something that's kind of like dirtier or just like kind of has that looser feel, there's a band
something ragged.
There's a band called Orange Goblin.
Okay.
And my go-to description for them is that they're like if the Sword listened to Motorhead instead of Black Sabbath. But if you don't know the Sword, that doesn't make any sense to you. But they're definitely.
I do like Motorhead though.
they are definitely more of that. It's like biker doom metal, but they got grooves. The songs don't overstay their welcome.
Right.
The vocals are, they're not like super clean, but it's just like that craggly voice. It's not necessarily like the, trying to get the inhuman guttural screams.
Right.
And I think that's something that I think they're a band that, most people at the very least would be like, you know what? Yeah, I could put this on in the background, blah, blah, blah. Or, things like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard or something like that.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah, they've got like 30 albums. Like they're like six. I think they're like, because they belong to a different band. Like I'm blanking on the history, but I'll send you some links. But I think that's kind of stuff that might be in that vibe of like, just giving that kind of that feeling that might be good, or you might just absolutely fuck it, which is fine too.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's always the way. I mean, like I go through different periods. I mean, when a friend of mine who was my radio station, I was at the very peak of Britpop. But we were drawn to the more kind of obscure parts of it, kind of thing. So and then from that the kind of the California version of it. It was all it was all a bit I don't want to, it's not loungy, but it was all a bit kind of easier listening kind of thing. But I got into bands like the Trues and there's a band out of Montreal called the Deers that I liked a lot. But again, it's more that a lot of that's more kind of on the melodic side of things. But I'll certainly give the stuff. I mean, it's one of those things that's like I don't even know where to go to ask kind of thing. So I'll definitely give these a listen. Right. Yeah.
Especially if like you dig some Mastodon. I think the Sword and Orange Goblin and King Gizzard. I think they'll be at least in the general area of like okay, I could dig into this a little bit more. Not. So I'll make sure I'll send you some.
Absolutely.
I'll cherry pick what I think would be good ends, and I'll send you some links to go check them out.
Send me your musical Pelham, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to.
Which I might add, I don't know if you've seen the movie, the original movie, The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
I've not seen the original. No.
It is amazing. I think it's on Prime right now. It is fucking amazing. But beyond anything else, the soundtrack to that movie is incredible. It is the grimiest. It's so good. It's got so many great jams on it. And I was talking about how much I loved it online a while back, and then Kagan McLeod got on and said, like a lot of classic hip hop was sampled from this soundtrack.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a really great soundtrack, but it's a fantastic movie.
Every Saturday, my wife and I, we have a standing like movie date. We put on a movie or whatever, and it's been real rough trying to find good stuff that's coming out really. So I think we're need to start digging back and watching some of these older movies that we just haven't.
Well, especially if you can find them, because like there's nobody streams old movies anymore, right? Like I don't know why Netflix decided we're gonna make $3 billion, $30 billion, blockbusters.
Yeah.
And just fart them out onto the streamers. Like, spend that money and buy some old MGM movies. You can't, there's,
I think Tubi's filling a lot of that void for
exactly. Like, Tubi's great. I love Tubi for exactly that reason. But even there, it's a little kind of mix and match, right? It's just what they can get. Studios are holding on to those old movies and not releasing them for some reason that I do not know.
Yeah, it's crazy. So how about some comics? Have there been any comics lately that you've been enjoying? I know it's hard to like stay up to date reading stuff when you're busy making them, but
yeah, we were joking about this before the show started, but most of the stuff that I buy nowadays, and I'll reach down and grab it again, are these boys, the artist editions. And I got another one down here too, because I started doing EC covers. So,
nice.
So I wanted to do a little bit of research. I mean, I've had this forever, but for
the audio folk, Tom's holding up a giant EC cover artist edition book that looks amazing.
I absolutely adore virtually all of the artist editions. It's a vibe thing for me, because there are a few that a lot of people are like, oh, you gotta get this one. I'm like, but I'll get that excited about the Gru one, which was awesome. The Gru one is amazing. All the Simonson ones are fantastic. So those for me are what fills a lot of that. What's filling a lot of that void. I don't have the time really to read anything nowadays, whether it's comics or big boy books. And as I said before, I mean, most of the books that I'm consuming, I'm consuming as audiobooks. So it's hard to keep track of things. I've got, every so often a friend will put something out and I will go out of my way to at the very least buy it. And then it kind of goes on a shelf for a little while until I can find time to read it. Right. So like I've got a few Kyle Starks things that I've really enjoyed. And the nice thing about Kyle's books is they're pretty fast reads. But they're Kyle is, I think, one of the best cartoonists working in North America. And I'm glad he's getting more work as a writer, but I love it when he draws, and I love it. I love the, I love the flow to his comics. Kaiju Max was a big one for me. It kind of fell off my radar because I'd stopped going to comic stores for a while. And then when all the big changes happened at Oni, I think the new regime came in and just started selling off all their old stock. So I got a call from a buddy of mine in Montreal saying, like, all the Kaiju Max trades are at the dollar store for $5 each. And I was like, whoa. And off I went, and I bought the rest of the series, and cried my eyes out. So but yeah, the bulk of what I consume nowadays are those artist editions, or filling in a lot of the stuff that I was into, like the kind of the building blocks for me when I was quite young were a lot of the 2000 AD. Not necessarily Dread, but Dread adjacent stuff, and it's very artist specific. So it's Cam Kennedy, it's Mick McMahon, it's old Dave Gibbons, it's some Ian Gibson here and there, and so I will. I have a retailer friend in Kingston that when interesting things come in collections, because I still buy collections, he'll give me a call and say, like, I just got a bunch of these. Do you want them? And the last thing I got from him, it's not in my office, it's downstairs, but the last thing I got from him was a box of original 2000 AD programs, the ones that don't even have covers. Oh. They're just newsprint from top to bottom, and it's like it's a color cover, but the cover is newsprint, and then black and white, 4 or 5 8-page black and white stories through the thing. And like 100, I didn't realize he was like, make me an offer. And I made him an offer, and I think he gave them to me for far cheaper than he really wanted to. Because I didn't realize how many were in that box. There are like 100 in there. Like it's like from somewhere in the mid 300s to somewhere in the mid 400s. And they're amazing. Just slowly going through. Because I gather somebody had moved from England to Kingston, and now they were just getting rid of everything. So they had all of these, and they also had, which I'm going to go back and take a look at some point, all of these. There was another era of 2000 AD when they were making kind of a slicker magazine that had color on the inside. And I'm going to spend an afternoon in Kingston at some point, just like leafing through, just looking for Mick McMahon and Cam Kennedy stuff. And I'll say, I will take this one, and I will take this one. And do that. Nice. Because that's there's a sweet spot for both of those guys that is everything to me,
That's awesome. Like that's really cool. Like that you got the chance to get like this incredibly like just unique things you probably would have never even.
It's a weird. I mean, it's like imprinting again, right? Like so, it's a weird thing that you kind of glom onto. Like I remember when I was about 12 years old, and we started. I moved to Ottawa when I was 11, just before I turned 11. And we had always, my mom had always had this rule. She didn't want us reading comic books, right? She didn't want us to get addicted. So when I was a little kid, I was like, well, no comics. But having said that, there was no shortage of like British cartoon books or Garfield treasuries or Herman treasuries or Far Side, well, later on Far Side, or bande dessinée, like Asterix and Tintin and things like that, right? So no shortage of any of that stuff, because in my parents' mind, those weren't comics, right? Yeah. Because they weren't like floppy superhero bullshit, right? So we had complete runs of Tintin and Asterix, and the other thing too is in Ontario, at least, I grew up in elementary school being in French immersion. So I understand French. I don't speak it very well. I speak like a 3-year-old, but I understand French, and I can read in French. And when you have, in elementary school, you have a library period. You go every 2 weeks and you get a book. Well, if you're in French immersion in Ontario, you get 2 books every couple of weeks. You get an English book, you get a French book. And the great thing about French libraries is they are full of comic books. And so, so the just whole ranges of other things that you would, at the best of time in any library period of any book you take out when you're in elementary school, you're not going to read those books. Like, you don't read them. Yeah. Right. But at the very least, these ones had like cool drawings in them, Yeah. But there were like literal bloody nose fist fights over like who got to take out Les Strumpf, the Smurfs, right? Yeah. So there was all of that. And when I was a little kid, we went to a friend of my dad's cottage for dinner. And to get my brother and I entertained, she pulled out this old box of comic books, and our eyes went wide. And we were like, oh, and my parents made a face, and she was like, what? And they were kind of like, well, we don't really like this kind of thing. And she went up, she used to be a school teacher, and she went up one side of them and down the other, talking about how like they help kids learn to read, and the ways of you can see the action, you can read the action, juxtaposition between two, and or not. And how those linkages get set up in a kid's mind, and moreover, the general sense of achievement for having actually read something that was fun and interesting to read. So when we went back to our cottage, we brought the box with us, and it was awesome. And or at least we got to keep a couple of comics from that. So when we got home to Timmins in Northern Ontario, where we lived at the time, later in the summer, my dad hit a bunch of garage sales and then just bought all the comic books. So I have like after that, I had all these like Marvel, Star Wars comics, like from the earliest ones, and most of which I just read to tissue, and lots of like Gold Key Funny Animal books and that kind of stuff. And eventually my mother relented and was like, okay, you can buy any kind, you can go down the store, you can use your allowance, you can buy a comic book. However, you're not allowed to buy anything that says to be continued. So I have the ends of a lot of runs. Because this was the thing, she just didn't want us to get addicted, right? So I got like the last issue of Contest of Champions. I got that classic Toth Action Comics annual. I got all this stuff that I bought off the spinner rack. But I never, they never connected up with anything. And then we moved to Ottawa in like 85. I think it was like New Year's Day in 1985. And lo and behold, Ottawa had comic book stores, which is a thing Timmins did not, right? So I was free and clear to go waste all of my money. Nice. And that's when I really got into it. And around that time, Titan was putting out these lovely, here, I've got it on my nice shelf. You saw nothing. Okay. Titan was putting out these, which are these beautiful albums. They're like 48-page. They're black and white, but they all had Bill Sienkiewicz covers, right? And so it was very smart on their part because they were, and this is a Judge Dredd one. It was very smart on their part because they knew that some little nerd like me was going to buy it for the cover. And I remember getting this home and being like so disappointed that it was Cam Kennedy. How could they hide such weird, goofy, actually, hey, this is kind of interesting to look at and I like the way he uses, but those are nice big feet and the articulation and that's funny. I like, that's scary as hell. And I just started to love it. I absolutely adored it. And it's a huge part of my DNA. Nice. And so now, Johnny Lucas and I, do a lot of kind of whenever we talk, we're like, which one did you get? Because we're trying to fill out our old collections of these things. And it's, for me too, it's really specific to this printing. Like it's got to be this, like these particular albums. And it's insanity. But I, at the very least, I can justify it because I'm not just getting any of it. They've got to be the right artists, and the right, the right kind of period, and the right, even with guys like Mick McMahon, there are periods of his that I mean, it's all good, like it's all good. Yeah. But there are some periods that I love more than others, and they're the periods when he got a bit more into abstraction and shapes, and when he was painting things a bit more. That's when it really hit for me. So things like The Last American, which they recently did a reprint of that looks absolutely gorgeous, and his Slain books are out of this world. Because he did this thing. He was when he was inking on a light table, and the claim is that it was a mistake, like he didn't know what he was doing because he had a thinner pen than he thought he did. Yeah. So it's it's not even hatching. It's just like filling in these areas with a thin line, but it's still describing the form. It's not just a dead thin line. And it's breathtaking because it's all this beautiful, wonderful detail, and it all like these thin lines that are like kind of filling in these darker areas. They're not just flat patterns; they're all describing what the area is, and there's this depth to it, but there's also this kind of tactile feel to it, and it's just It's breathtaking stuff. It's absolutely gorgeous. So that's the stuff that I really,
It's amazing. It's like the stuff that just etches itself into our brain, like the imprinting as you ring up, it's just stuck there. And
yeah.
there's no matter how many years pass or whatever, it still gives you that damn when you look at it.
And the McMahon stuff I discovered later. I discovered much later, but the Cam Kennedy stuff is what brought me in. Like that's the stuff that because they were very similar artists, and that was the through line in Steve Dillon as well. Like his period with 2000 AD when he was still using a brush, but he was banging out pages like crazy, and they're so lush. Like they're so. There's so much volume there in his inks, and they're putting out. Getting back to the artist edition thing, Titan has been putting out, or 2000 AD, or whoever calls themselves now, are putting out these. Oh God, what are they called? They're not called Epic editions, Icon editions, whatever. They're putting out their own line of artist edition books. So they did a Brian Bolland Dread, and they've done 2 Mick McMahon books. I've got the second one because it's got the Slain stuff in it, and it's got the Last American in it. And they're about to put out a Steve Dillon one, which I don't even need to see. I know I want it, and I'm desperate, absolutely on tenterhooks, for them to put out a Cam Kennedy one. I don't care what's in it. I will buy it,
Yeah, it's you bring up the term lush with that, and that is easily the first thing that comes to my brain whenever I think about your work.
Oh, thank you.
Just like there's and it's such a weird term to use, like lush. Like what does that even mean? But it's just like it just feels so organic. It feels so like just full of life, and just the way you even your pencils on the stuff, and the very, very, very few times I even dared to try to ink anything that you had posted or whatever pencils of, just in my own hidden shame. I think I posted it once.
Oh, don't! No one should ever be ashamed of stuff like that. Like I have a Dropbox folder that I give people the invite to if they want to practice their inking, or if they want to practice their coloring, or whatever. It's just full of like pencils of mine and some pencils of Nick Darrington's from when I was inking Doom Patrol. He signed off on it. And stuff like that. That like anybody, if you want the invite, I'll give it to you after this. Like anybody who ever approaches me and says like I want to learn, I'm more than happy. It'll take me forever to get a crit back to you, but I will do it. If you want it. Many
years ago, I did ink one of your monsters, and I posted it. I think I tagged you, and I think your response was like, "That's a nice shoulder," and I was like, I'll take it.
Yeah, I'm sorry about it. That is very much, as you well know now, like that is very much, that tends to be how,
Yeah. No, for a while I was doing, I was trying to ink other people's work and get some critiques and all that. And our mutual bud, Mike Norton, he definitely, one of the sweetest men alive, but also like he told me what I was doing wrong.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too. Is like, I mean, you don't, because this is the thing, like you don't need to be a dick about it.
Yeah.
Like there are lots of people who have these horror stories about these legends who'd given them crits, and he was like, "Oh, my hands were shaking. I gave it to him. He ripped me apart." It's like, well, then he was a dick. Like that's not how you do it. Like there's nothing. I mean, because other people will defend that kind of behavior and say like, well, you have to have this kind of resilience and really like it proves that you really want it, kind of thing. Yeah. And it's like I look at that and I'm going, well, no, because not everybody has that, and really what you've done is dissuaded somebody who may have something really beautiful they want to do, or say or whatever, right? So I tend to be like, I'll be honest with people, but there's no reason not to encourage them at the same time. And say like, okay, look, here's how I would approach this. I like what you're doing here, but I'm seeing if you applied what you did over here to over here, like there was a kid that brought me some stuff. He was under the wing he was a friend and kind of very much under the wing of another artist. And I remembered I'd known that other artist since he was younger as well, right? And he at the time was very influenced by another artist that is, senior to both of us. And I was like, look, okay, I'm looking at this, and I was looking at this stuff, and I'd had a few books out at the time. I was nothing special, but by virtue of the fact that I was making a living in comics, he was interested in my opinion, right? So I looked at his stuff, and I was like, I like this a lot. I don't want you to take, but I see your influence here, 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 and here. Like I see the guy that you're trying to be. Now over here, I see you. I see the thing that you do. I see the stuff that you learned from these places and how you applied it to how you do what you do. I want you to go back and do these like you did like this. That. And I wound up doing the same thing to the kid that was under his wing and saying like, look, I can see X, and I know you're doing what X does because he's, you're in the same studio as he is, and he's trying to help you out, and he's not wrong to do so. But I can see you trying to kind of make him happy by doing what he does here. Over here, though, I see you actually just drawing. You're just figuring it out.
Yeah.
I want to see more of this, and I think he took my advice. I'd like to think he took my advice. All three of them are professional artists now. All three of them are working. And everybody's good. But that's more what I had guys who took me under their wing and gave me good advice. The other side of that, like, monster crit is just people are like, keep at it, kid. Like, that's not helpful to anybody, So I'll try and, find something I like and then build on that. If I see something, because otherwise you're not really doing anyone any good. And even if it's the worst thing in the world, you can get as remedial as everything in the world is made of three shapes. You can get down to that nitty gritty. You can get down to the level of, listen, here's what I want you to do. Go buy a sketchbook, go buy some pencils. For 30 minutes every day, I want you to draw whatever's directly in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's the commitment you need to make to this. And I promise you, if you go by the logic of trying to figure out how that thing is constructed in an art, in a not like how does the television tube go into whatever, but just like this is a box, the box is made this way, and this is a if you look at it from that perspective of like taking things down to their basic shapes and then building them back up again. I guarantee you that, when you're done in 2 months or whatever, when you've exhausted that sketchbook, if you look at the first page and then you look at the last page, you will see an improvement. Like it's little things like that. Like that's it's fairly remedial stuff, but at the very least, it's encouraging. And I have always believed that, like, high tide raises all boats, right? So like if if I'm doing well, I try and make sure the people around me are doing well. So my dog just came in and started knocking things over. If I have it in me to help somebody, I do. I may not have it in me, so you may not get the greatest response from me in the world, but at least I'll try. And there's tape stuck to my dog. That's how messy my studio is.
It's amazing what the dog's doing too.
Yeah. But going back to what you were talking about before with just like volume and bounce and lushness and things like that. I honestly, the other side of that story about my folks is that I really have my mom to thank for that. That kind of, I'm petting my dog's stomach right now. for that side of things, because again, my earliest touchstones in art, in comics art, were aesthetics. They were like Albert Uderzo. They were. I had an illustrated Wind in the Willows by Harry Hargraves. I had access to all sorts of books by Ronald Searle and Felwell and Sempe and all these people who were not traditional North American cartoonists, but cartoonists of great strength. One way or another. You can see my dog in the background. I'm just going to let her in. I'm going to let her in. I'm going to keep talking. You see, but there are all these people that they did different kinds of things, but they were still doing comics. Sniffs for skunk, doesn't smell one. I mean, one of my honestly, I think the first real cartoonist that I was introduced to was. Oh God, I've just blanked his name. The Snowman. Raymond Briggs.
Okay.
He did these Father Christmas books that would come out every Christmas. And these beautifully painted graphic novels. They're about 36, 48 pages long each, but they're comics. And they're incredible works of storytelling. Like they're just absolutely incredible. So like these are the foundation stones on where I kind of learned to do this stuff. I didn't learn to draw by tracing American artists. I learned by, I went to art school as well, but I always had a pencil in my hand and was always, from when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a newspaper cartoonist. I wanted to do Garfield. I wanted to do, that kind of thing. And when I discovered superhero comics, that's where I went. I started getting into that kind of stuff. But I always had this grounding in these different traditions of storytelling and these different traditions in drawing and cartooning. Yeah. So I think it set me apart, certainly, in the industry over the years. For sure. But that has both been a benefit and it's both benefited and detracted from my career, because I'm never going to be, like I always refer to myself as a meat and potatoes artist. I'm never going to be the highlight of a show I might be for some weird nerd, but you know what I mean? Like I'm not, nobody's ever going to try to sell their show based on my name. So,
well, from my perspective as a fan of your work, it's always, it's like whatever Tom's doing is like, at the very least is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and that's all I can hope for. Even if the project's
not really up my alley, which few and far have not been, or few, very few have not been my jam in terms of like just material. Still, it's like it's still one, great to look at, and two, interesting and cool to see how your style, kind of rides the waves of these different genres. Well, that's the other thing that I really kind of I tend to rail against. There's an attitude. A lot of times you'll hear when people are giving advice, they're like, "Well, you got to develop your style." No, you don't. You just need to learn to draw. Like just draw. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Like I think it's Kelly Freas, the old the science fiction Mad Magazine painter. I believe this is a quote. I might be wrong, but I believe this is one of his quotes, who's basically, your style is a combination of all the mistakes you don't know you're making. Yeah.
And I've always believed in that, if you're like, by all means, look at other people's stuff and figure out like how you want to do things and learn from them, but always attribute it, kind of bring it back to, well, how did they figure that out? Not like what's the surface detail of this look like, but how did they figure that out? how did they figure out the construction of that elbow? How did, you know, how does that brick lay on that rock and look like it's taking up space and weight? You know, like those are the things you should be looking at, not like what combination of strokes do I make over here because this is what brick should look like, and what are the combination of strokes I should make over here because that's what wood looks like. Like you know, none of that. And you know, how do I make the perfect sharp jaw so I don't have to draw under? And it's like, no, draw under. Like do all that shit. Like do, and it's now I've got to let my dog in now. It's the number one. It's the number one thing that I always wind up like whenever somebody brings me their portfolio. Boy, come here. Is oftentimes I will look at something and I will see that there isn't any construction there. You know, like, and I at one point I had a kid show me his stuff, and he was really proud of that. He was like, I didn't have to do any construction whatsoever. And I was like, I can tell. And again, very politely, I was like, well, you need to. Like, there's a reason why you do that. Like, you know, if we just built houses out of bricks and not wood, then they would fall down. So, you know, it's finding a balance, and certainly. I sat next to a guy, like an older artist at one time at a show, and I remember he was giving drawing advice to some kid, and everything he said was wrong. Like, everything he said was driving me insane. I'm too polite to kind of brag and say, well, actually, you know, you could think about doing it. It was a lot of like, this is how you do a hand. This is how you do it. And, you know, this is how you do a foot. You know, you got to get to a point where you can do it so you're not even thinking you can believe it. It's like, no! You know, like, hands are made with tendons and fingers and knuckles, and they move so that you can express whatever you're trying to, your characters, like they're 50% of your character's character. Like if you're acting in a comic and like you want a guy holding a cigarette, and if he's a Nazi, he holds it like this. You know, like you want, you know, these are important things that you have to think about, and you don't have to spend your life thinking about them. You have to spend hours and hours just making the perfect line, but you do need to consider every little, you know, part of construction, and it goes beyond just drawing. It goes into the story. It goes into like all of it. Like it's all, you know, it's all about stripping things down to their basic elements and then building them back up again. And anytime you do that, you'll find like you want to pull your hair out, but you'll find that at the end, it's a better product. You know. Yeah.
No, you brought up a lot of great points about just, you know, giving and getting critiques in general. And that was one of the things that, you know, to summarize real quick, my own personal art journey, like, you know, I, you know, grew up in the height of the Image era, all that kind of stuff. But I also was like super hardcore against like tracing over people to learn how to do things for some reason. So I never had that like phase where I did that, which probably would have been very helpful for me. And then somewhere around, you know, right in high school, I kind of discovered music, and comics weren't really doing it for me. So I kind of stopped drawing for about. Well,
music will get you laid. Yeah. Comics will never get you laid. Well, even these days, they're not going to get you laid.
But, not if you choose to be a bass player like I did. But
fair enough. I didn't know you were one of those.
Well, that's where I started now. Hey, I got 2 kids, so it happened at least twice. So you know, around, you know, 10 years later or so, whatever, I started getting back into comics and started doodling again, and slowly like getting back into it and trying to figure it out. And I fell into the trap of like trying to chase like, what is my style? What do I do? And I had other like brain things that were happening that were preventing me from like enjoying whatever progressions I had, whatever. But you know, I'm very much the type of person who's like, I need to do the thing to learn the thing.
Yeah, I am too.
So sitting down with the sketchbook and all that, you might as well ask me to sandpaper my face off. Like I don't want to do that.
For me, that is doing the thing.
Yeah,
you know,
well, for me, it's like I want to make comics, so like I had to learn by making comics, and so that means failing publicly, because I'm making these comics that I'm putting out, and I'm making my mistakes publicly, which is fine. But like, you know, in some point in there, you know, I was like trying to ink other people, just try to learn and get like, because I knew at least that much, like if I try to ink over other people's pencils that I like their work, I'm going to be taking something in through osmosis. Something's going to be bringing into me. So like, like some stuff from you, Mike Norton, Mark Laming, some other artists that Mike Waringo. I still like to like find a Mike Waringo piece from time to time, like once a year. I like to try to ink one because it's so not what I do, but it's also like the quote unquote right way to do it. It's hard to argue about any of the choices he ever made.
Somebody else who I've actually tried, one of the few people I've done that with, but there's so much of his pencil work out there is Alan Davis.
Oh yeah,
because he has such a fluid and painterly pencil line that it invites a lot of interpretation, and so you can get more technical, you can get more fluid, you can get more painterly, you can get more stiff with it, and you get some interesting results. But there's a lot there, you know, and you learn. And the other thing too is like you don't have to show this stuff to anybody. There's lots of stuff I don't show people, you know.
And that's you know, that's a lesson like I felt like I needed to learn before, because you know, like nowadays, like say I'm on Instagram or something, I'll post, you know, a guitar playing video or whatever, and no one sees the 10 times I like screwed it up. You know, they just see the one, but like I'll post a sketch or like I almost feel like, you know, whenever I post art, that's the only time I'm actually going to see it how it actually is. And so I'll be able to find out what's wrong with it, which is fine by me. You know,
I understand the impulse.
Anymore. I don't care anymore about that kind of thing, just because I've done it so much. But you know, the point I'm really trying to get to is like when you're talking about the critiques and all that. It is very much like this myth of like you got to have a tough skin, you know, thick skin to make it, and it's like no, you got to be able to take a critique, but you don't
have to put up.
But if you're giving a critique, that doesn't mean you get to be an asshole about it. And
honestly, there's a lot of people who take critiques badly.
You know, and it feels like, you know, you know, since I've done some cons and I have some books, you know, sometimes I'll have someone come up to me like, "Hey, can you look at my stuff?" And I'm like, you know, I'm like, I'll name like 5 other people, like, you know, they're here, right? You know, I'm like, oh, but you know, after a while, I just like tell myself like, just shut up and, you know, check it out. And usually it's a younger person or whatever, and the first thing that goes through my head is like, you know, I don't want to be the guy who's going to like tell them like, you're dash any dreams or whatever, you know? And so it's always like finding, like you said, like I try to find the things I'm like, wow, you did this great. You know, I like how you used your perspective here and things like that. And, but like at all levels, it's like that. And then, you know, what I more so try to tell them is basically not how to do a thing, but like, just like how to like mentally keep going with things. And thankfully I've had some people like come back year after year, and I'm like, wow, you're like kicking ass, like you're doing great, like you're better and better.
Well, that's the thing, and that's the value of that sketchbook exercise, that like 20, 30 minutes a day, because you know, you need a certain amount of mental toughness, sure, but and resilience and whatever, but what you really need is the frankly, discipline, not in a strict, shitty, like you gotta be at your table 8 hours a day and you know, forget your kids and blah blah blah, kind of crap. But I mean, just the discipline of like, do you like to sit down and draw for 30 minutes? Can you do even that? Because this is the lowest. Because I mean, this is why you've got like the proliferation of like lazy fuckers doing generative AI crap, right? It's people that want the candy without paying for it. Like they want the finished product, regardless of what the finished product looks like, so they can feel validated by having done it. But they don't want to put any kind of work or art, or because the art isn't the final product. The art is the work that brought the final. It's the thought process. It's the math. It's the theory. It's the all of it. Like it. So bringing it back down to just like, are you willing to, whatever else is happening in your life right now, are you willing to sit down for 20 minutes, just 20 minutes once a day, and look at the thing in front of you and look at a sketchbook and move your pencil around? Because if you can't commit to even that, this might not be the life for you, kind of thing. Like, and which is not to say don't do it. It's not to say quit. It's not to say whatever. But like this will be a fun hobby. If you want to do it, this is not necessarily. I don't know that this is
your career, man.
Exactly. I don't know that, or any art at all. It doesn't need to. If you like sitting down for 20 minutes and playing Blackbird on your guitar once a week, great.
Yeah.
You don't need to be in a band. Like it doesn't. You're not going to tour. You're not going to. It's cool that you have a thing that you do that is fun, that makes you feel happy and safe, and that's good.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily make it a career. And actually, I'm going to take us on a huge tangent here. But in talking about with this Game Masters book, what I've found myself talking about in a lot of interviews, and I'm starting to actually really process and put it together, is like you've read the foreword in D&D, so which is very much about a personal story about depression. It was about, like, I hit a wall creatively, and I started to hate to draw, and what I realized was that it was because I'd lost. Well, A was the thing that I used to do to make myself feel safe and comfortable. And because all of the drawing I was doing in my life was professional, it was the thing that was, helping to pay my mortgage, and it wasn't making me feel safe anymore. Right. So all the joy had gone out of it. And when I went and played D&D with my friends, and I started doodling and drawing and whatever, I was carving out time. I discovered that what I needed to do to get back to that was to carve out time where I just draw for me. It's not for anybody else. It's not for a project, or it could be for a project. Doesn't matter. But it's for me. It's for mine. It's for my pleasure. It's for my comfort. It's for my enjoyment. And out of that has sprung, like, all the TV doodle stuff, all the affable space monsters, all the, whatever. All of those things that I post nowadays that are like sketches from my iPad of whatever. That's what that is. That's me carving out the time to make a thing that I like. But what I'm starting to realize is that what it's about is play. Part of the reason that I got asked recently in another interview, like, why do you think there's such a proliferation of role-playing games these days? And I think it's genuinely, like, you've got kids, like, you get told over and over and over again in child development the importance of creative play.
Yes.
I don't think that goes away. I think that's something we all need. I think it's something that as you grow up, you don't need to put aside childish things. I mean, if you're being a dick to somebody online because they don't like the flash right, put away that childish thing. That childish thing's not for you anymore. But I think we all need these spaces. Like, my wife, for instance, has a game night, like, every week. Like just board games and stuff like that. That's an opportunity for her to literally to play. But I mean, there are people with fantasy football leagues and other people playing role-playing games. For me, it's sitting down in front of the TV and just like making a little werewolf guy. But what that comes down to is genuinely a sense of play. It brings down. It pushes up your serotonin, it brings down your whatever, because you're relaxed and you're in a safe spot because you've done a thing that brings you joy the way that you experienced it when you were a kid, right?
Yeah.
that's what I think, a lot of these things are for. Like, if you're not necessarily cut out to be a pro at this, it doesn't mean you throw it all away. It means you keep doing it, and you're happy, you're content doing it, and you show it sometimes you don't. But I never want anybody to think, like, if I'm critical about, maybe you don't have what it takes to be a professional comics artist. That doesn't mean you should stop drawing. It doesn't mean you should stop trying to make comics. It doesn't mean you should stop anything that is bringing you joy. But you should start approaching it, rather than as being the thing that's going to pay your rent, being the thing that brings you joy. Yes. And there's nothing less artistic about that. There's nothing less vocational about that. There's nothing less valuable about that. That's how I've kind of felt about it. Like, there are certainly things in my job, because I've since that time, I've learned to find more joy in the actual, like, the work that I do. Yeah. I've been able to find places where I can have fun. Like, sometimes it's a grind, it's always going to be a grind.
It's still work.
Yeah, work is work, right? Like, you got to get up, you got to do it. But you can find those little spaces inside it where you're making yourself happy, right? But at the end of the day, you're going to reward yourself by sitting down on the sofa and drawing a little werewolf guy, right? So it all kind of works out.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. This idea that I'm really starting to glom onto now. Like I said, and it's really just been the last few weeks that I've started to kind of put these things together. That while role-playing games for me certainly became an escape and gave me that opportunity for creative play. The creative play I was doing personally for me were those doodles, right? Yeah. Because that's what it was for me. But for other people who don't necessarily have that kind of an artistic creative outlet, just the actual act of cooperative storytelling, that's creative play. Like, that's play. That's a thing that your brain needs. And I think more than ever, I'm thinking more, as things get more and more stressful in the world, I think it's something everybody needs, and whatever that is for you, like, whatever you can find, do it. Yeah.
I mean, you are saying everything that I truly believe myself as well. It's just as this world has proven, like the notion of, like, childish things and all that. Like, there's immaturity, which is the
you like the Flash the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. Versus like the things that just we enjoyed as a child, but like a prime.
It doesn't even need. And the thing is, it doesn't even need to be a thing you enjoyed as a child. It just needs to be something that you found that makes you feel the joy you felt as a child.
Yeah.
But go on. I cut you off.
Yeah. No. Not. I don't want to get delve into something too heavy about that, but for me, art was a big struggle. I experienced some traumatic things when I was a kid, and it had to do with art, my enjoying art, like enjoying making art, because that's how things happened. So as I discovered later, in the past few years, after taking care of my mental health about it, I realized that, like, I would sabotage myself a lot. Whenever I would start to improve with art as an adult, I would immediately, like, cast aside everything I was learning to, like, go in a different direction, because I felt like I was betraying myself as a kid. But this is me getting to the point where I'm like, I've now come to the point to where, like, I get joy out of it. It's a safe place for me. It's something I enjoy doing. And I am, granted, I'm 41 going on 42. I got 2 kids. I got a wife. I got a mortgage. I have a very grounded home. So, I am very realistic about things. If I never, even though my comic making career has been, slowly going on an up, on a ramp up with making things and having things come out and getting paid for things and yada, yada, yada. for a long time now, I have been very much of the mindset, like, even if I don't do this for a living, I'm still going to make them.
Yeah.
You know, I'll just make less. I'll be making less. But that just means to me, like, the ones I need to make are the ones I want to make, you know? And, you know, finding, you know, and then to the point of you're finding that play, that joy, like, that's so much of, like, you know, all these dumb things behind me, you know? Yeah, I make music and all that, but sometimes I just want to sit down for 30 minutes and play some really dumb metal riffs, you know? Or, you know, like all the kaiju vinyl behind me. That's relatively new, but that's me embracing the fact that I loved watching these movies as a kid. It brings me joy to have these figures here, and, you know, to see my kids have interest in them and all that, you know, that's also, like, cool.
Yeah.
And, like, playing D&D and stuff like that, that's always something I've wanted to try to get into, but I just never had the time for.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, like,
and doing that kind of stuff. And, you know, to sloppily segue into Game Masters, you know, this is the comic book history of role-playing games. It's written by Fred Van Lente, who's no stranger to writing a comic book history of things.
No, exactly.
Just, you know, I don't want to keep too much of your time, because I've really enjoyed this conversation with you, but we're broaching up on 2 hours. I don't want to keep you for all night, even though I'm pretty sure the way both our brains work, we'd probably be going on and on and on. About things.
I haven't lost my voice yet, so we're still fine.
Yeah. to get to the main reason you're here, and that is to talk about Game Masters. Was this, you know, I'm sure you've known Fred for a long time.
Oh, very long.
In the industry, and was this something that, like, he, like, immediately approached you with, or was it something that, like, because he's done the comic book history of things and all that, so was like, were you the guy he knew to talk to about this, or was it some other way?
Well, actually what happened, it's kind of funny because it's a very roundabout way of doing this. I was trying to put a book together for somebody else, and it didn't happen because it was pre-diagnosis Tom, and I spun out. But while I was in the middle of that year-long anxiety attack, Fred called me up and he said, like, hey, I've just signed up with this publisher, and they want me doing sports comic book history. So I've got this book they want me to do. Would you be interested at all in doing the comic book history of basketball? And I'm 6'5" and very much an indoor kid. I resent the fuck out of basketball. I hate it. Because every conversation that was started with me from the age of 12 to 30 was, I guess you're great at basketball. Like, no, I'm great at knocking my head on things, but no. So I've just never, so it was an immediate no. I was like, no. And he was like, well, how about baseball? I was like, no, I just, no. And he was like, well, okay, well, that runs the gamut with these guys. But look, I do these books. So is there any subject you think you might want to do? And I was like, I don't know, D&D. It was literally just that kind of thing. And we talked about it a little bit. And I was like, look, I mean, it's down the way. And it's like, yeah, it's down the way. And then I'm not great at gauging time, but it really felt like it was like a month later. I had like 3 chapters in my lap. It had to have been like 6 months or whatever. But yeah, he'd written 3 chapters, and I was like, well, I guess I'm doing this now, But as a result of other necessities and contracts and jobs I needed to do, and actually making money and paying a mortgage, this job became the thing that I would just kind of peck away at in the background. And while that was going on, it really developed and changed, because Fred already had an outline. He knew what the chapters were going to be, kind of thing. But what some of the reference points were going to be, and a lot of that evolved to in a book like this, every so often you have like a mascot or something like that.
Okay.
And that went from being a particular character at the very earliest stages. It was the dungeon master from the old D&D cartoon. And I didn't really love that, and Fred didn't really love that, but it was just like, well, this is a way in kind of thing, right? And what that became is this very kind of insultingly stereotypical like wizard hat with like stars and moons on it and stuff. But that hat, we basically watch that hat get passed down through the ages whenever we want to make a point about role-playing games kind of thing. Like you first see it, it's like a Roman legionary wearing it in like a bar somewhere. Because, the earliest games were these dice games with 20-sided dice and things like that, of these kinds of things. And then you work your way through, Chaturang and chess and Prussian war games and things like that. And so we'll show like the I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the kind of the father of Prussian wargaming, at one point or another, he'll be putting that hat on. It's like those kinds of things that kind of develop organically over the course of years, because it's been the better part of 7 years, I think, that we've worked on this. And like I said, it's just me like pecking away at it a little bit at a time. When I can. So those conversations, because you wind up kind of getting so deep when you're not actually able to make any forward momentum on the book itself. You kind of drive back into the things that you've already done, and you kind of drive back into the theory of just the storytelling style that you're going through. And you find those little connections that you can make. And so ultimately, like Fred's never been too picky or possessive or whatever about his scripts, and I'm the same way with my art, So at the layout stage, like the script stage and the layout stage, that's when those things first kind of meet and bash together. And that's when you can make those little changes, or saying like in the margins, like, what if we did this instead of this? What if we did this instead of this? Or, well, actually that needs to be this, because over here we're going to do, a lot of that kind of thing. And, this was supposed to be this guy. Well, here's a reference for that guy. And it's like, oh, okay, I think I found better reference for him over here. You do a lot of that kind of stuff. And that's just the conversation of any kind of collaborative media, or at least that should be the conversation of any kind of collaborative medium. And typically I've worked best when I'm working with writers. I've worked best when that is how we do it. Like from the very beginning, we'll be like, okay, what's this going to be? Let's talk about it. And then they go off and do their thing, and then I get whatever it is, and I look at it and say like, okay, what if we did this? And they're like, cool or not cool, but we have that conversation, right? Yeah. And I've had that kind of relationship for years with Fred. I've had that kind of relationship with Parker. Some writers deal with it better than others, but I've been very lucky. James Asmus on Quantum and Woody was really great with that. I've had a lot of luck in not either being a prima donna or finding myself stuck with one. So it's been good. And Fred is patient. So it's been overall, for whatever, we have certainly lost our tempers at each other over the course of this, for various things that each of us do that drive the other one nuts. But that you're going to find that in any creative relationship as well, So in the end, we're both very happy with what we've made, and very proud of it. So I'm just finishing up inking the last few pages, and we're and in the meantime doing covers for other things, and gearing up for my next job, which will be
the next thing.
Yeah, well, exactly. But yeah, I will have a reliable source of income for 2 years after this that I'm very excited about.
That's kudos. That's got to be a reassuring thing.
And the wildest thing about it is I'm going very much back to my origins, and I'm drawing bande dessinée. I'm going to be. I'm serious. I signed a deal with a French company. I'm going to be doing a series of French.
That's awesome.
Albums. So.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear you. Awesome, not in that it took you guys that long, but it's awesome to hear that, like, you know, even at, you know, your and Fred's level, where you guys have been in the industry for, you know, many years, you've done tons of, you know, books for different companies and stuff like that. There's still those projects where it's like, we're really excited about doing this, and we're gonna keep chipping away, and eventually it'll be done.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. There are points, like, in that 7 years where you're like, God, why did I say yes to this? And I think at one point I even said, like, get somebody else to draw this. It was early days. I hadn't done much, and I was just like, I was so stressed out by other things. And he's like, well, no, it's you. And some of it was just. Some of it as well, like when I was in kind of my darker moments, I was like, the only thing keeping me doing this is friendship. Like, you know, because I mean, like you that's birth pains, you know, like that's just the way it goes, right? So at the end of the day, I didn't want to lose a friend. I believed in the project itself, and I knew that, you know, when we finally got it put together, it would be something people enjoyed. So, and I was very happy. You know, it's getting colored by Bill Crabtree, who is my kind of colorist of choice nowadays. And so he signed on. He's colored the first couple of pages, and they're beautiful. We're with Clover Press too. That was one of the other things too that was kind of slowing down the process, because we kept trying to find publishers through that whole time, and we came close with a couple, and then just something would go wrong. Like there'd be an internal implosion, or there was one company that was like led by three guys. Two of them were really into it, and one of them was not. And you know, it was one of those things where and you know, Fred always wanted to go with a Kickstarter, and I've only done one Kickstarter before. It's sitting on the table right behind you, and that was a weird circumstance, and I don't, as a result, I don't feel like I got the full experience. So I'm still very standoffish. I was still very standoffish, but like, I don't know. And there's always the kind of imposter syndrome crap that like, nobody's going to pay for a book I drew, you know, like there's a lot of that. Right. So, when I had approached Hank about something else, and I brought this up, Hank is Clover Press, or at least that's my guy, Clover Press, as it were. But Clover Press has kind of come into, they're running the Kickstarter. They're going to be publishing the book. They're going to be keeping it in print and distributing it through like regular bookstore means. And so, you know, when it's all, you know, people are going to get the special stuff through the Kickstarter, but, you know, it will exist on bookshelves after that, you know, in bookstores and stuff like that, which is all I ever want, you know. And I needed that kind of guarantee that there would be some kind of real distribution after the actual Kickstarter itself. Hank was the publisher of Wildstorm. He was the number 3 guy at DC forever. He's always been in my corner. I've always trusted him. And I love him to pieces. And so when I found out that was an option for us, I reached out to him, and he was like, "Let me see," and you know, it was all green lights. And they've been great to us, and they're the one thing, you know, beyond anything else with Clover, even if Fred wasn't there, they just make a real good looking book. Like the books they put out look good. And that was the thing that, you know, that's the real clincher. It's like, I want a thing. I want a nice, big, solid chunk of book that I'm going to be proud of. That's going to have some weight to it. It's gonna, you know. So, you know, I'm really excited about that. I'm excited that because we're doing it through Kickstarter, one of the we've got like different tiers. So one of the stretch goals is if we hit a certain point, we're going to have 3 extra chapters by 3 other artists.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is amazing. And they're like little tangents to what the main through line of the book. But we've got Allison Sampson, Ryan Dunleavy, longtime Fred partner, and Chris Schweitzer. Are going to be doing them. So I'm over the moon. I'm hoping beyond hope that we hit those stretch goals, because I want to see what they do, and I want them to be in our little family, you know. But I'm just really happy. I'm really happy so far with like everything. You know, now that we're over the hump of doing it, now like of actually, you know, the work of making it, and we're on the other side of that, and we're just rolling toward the campaign, and everything looks like it's in place. And I'm not starving or destitute. And, you know, I'm not taking my pockets inside out with little flies flying out of them or anything like it. You can have the excitement about it getting out now. Because these last 2 years professionally have been horrible, right? So it's really all those other things and stresses will bog you down on things. So I'm feeling a lot more positive about everything now, and you know, having seen the chunk of book that's finished and seeing it all together, and really getting that sense of accomplishment. Because I don't know who said it, but you know, making a book is horrible. Having a book is great. Making a book is terrible. Right. So I'm at that stage now where there's enough of it assembled that I'm like, this is great. And it fills you with new kind of, you know, as you got over the mountain, now you're just slaloming down. Right. So that's how it feels now. It's very energizing time. Unfortunately, I've got like a million different interviews. I'm like, this is great. I love this. This is, you know, doing podcasts and stuff is great. I've had to do a bunch of email interviews, which for me, that's my kind of like, I'm happy to do the press. I'm happy to do it. But it does take more of me than it probably should, just because of my own brain chemistry, you know?
Yeah. Sorry, my silly camera is getting really...
it's getting tired.
Yeah. It's refreshing to hear that, like, you know, even now, like you're still excited about a book being done and coming out and having it. And I'm sure this one has more juice behind it than a work for hire thing. But even then, you know, just because you have so much invested into it, it's a topic and it's with a friend, and you're working with Clover,
and and we own it. You know, it's great. It's great. I've certainly, you know, I've been treated very well by most of the publishers I work with, but I don't own those things, you know. And I'm still drawing royalties off them, but I don't own them. You know, at this stage in my career, I own one thing. Well, I own 2 things, but one of them only exists for 4 pages. But I own one thing, and it's mysterious. Now I own 2 things, and I'm going to be doing this French thing, which I still won't own, but at least I'll get paid very well, and I'll get very nice royalties on it. But after that, I'm doing a book with Alex DeCampi, and we will own that. And hopefully I'll also be doing a book with my buddy Benito Sereno, and we will own that. You know, those are the things I'm trying to kind of hold on to stay positive through. A lot of this stuff. I mean, you know, I'm still a whore. I mean, I'm still going to do whatever anybody wants me to do. If they've got the money, I'm your private dancer, Don.
I mean, there's still got to be fun in drawing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure.
I mean, like I'm not working at a quarry. You know, like I'm doing okay. You know, it's things can be. You know, the climate toward artists nowadays is not as great as it used to be, but I'm still in a pretty good position. My wife has a good job. Worst comes to worst, I can sell some of my crap, it's fine, but it's nice to know that you're, it sounds stupid, but like building equity in something, building cultural equity in something.
Yeah.
From my perspective, from, what I do, it feels good in a way that I didn't know it could before I had it. Like the moment that the rights for Mysterious reverted to Parker and I, there was a giddiness to that we were both like, wait a minute, this is ours, like free and clear. This is ours. We could do whatever. We could drill holes through it. We could, we could do whatever we want. That was really great. So it's nice to have those inroads. And like I said, I'm really proud of this book, and I'm really proud of what we've done, and I'm hoping that now that I'm on the downward slope from it, that continues and people really dig it,
Yeah.
So,
well, as someone who's, done 3 Kickstarters in the past year and a half and is gearing up for another one soon and all that, I enjoy the ride. I'm not going to pretend that you and Fred on a role-playing history book is at the same level of what I'm doing, as much as I love what I do and I'm appreciative of the response we have, but I'm sure the audience for this is much wider based.
I hope so, yeah.
And I'm sure it's going to be an immense success. If it helps at all, every guest I've had on who's had a crowdfunding project has funded at the very least.
Yeah. If you don't mind me coming down to Illinois and rubbing your head
if I can be the rabbit's foot for anybody, I'm happy to be that.
And the best way right now, because the campaign starts later this summer rather. But the best thing people can do right now is, oh shit, where is it? I made them work up one of those little bit.ly things. So it's bit.ly / whatever, Game Masters Pod. But, and I will send you the link so you can put it in the show notes and stuff. But on top of that, the easiest thing you can do is just go to Kickstarter and search Game Masters or Clover Press. The sign up newsletter thing, like pre-launch thingy, is the first thing that pops up for both those searches. So we're easy to find. Sign up for all the early bird stuff and all the news as it and you'll be the first. You'll be able to know what's going on with all of it. You'll probably know before I do, because I just keep my nose down. So,
well, I literally just did it right now, easy peasy.
Cool. Yep.
And if the show comes out and you all have launched, whatever the most current information we have when the show launches, it'll be linked in the show notes. Everyone can go.
Absolutely, that's awesome.
Thank you very much. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
Again, I could chat with you about a bunch of other stuff for a lot longer, but
I'm sure we will.
We're at the 2 hour plus mark. I'll have to have you back on.
I'd love to.
Yeah, and but before you go, you did kind of hint to me earlier. You had a really funny story about your studio.
Okay, cool. So
for the audio folk who can't see, go check out the video version. But Tom's studio is
it's like a tableau. It's like a tableau from Gorman Gast. Behind me.
He works there, so it's a living, breathing, working artist space.
It's like a hoarder's worst nightmare. I know where most things are. I am the kind of person, though, that when I lose something, I will, rather than really digging down to try and find it, I will go to the art store and buy a new one. So that's how bad it has been.
Hard same.
But if you look to my left, you will see some lovely old. I'm going to move my computer over so you can see. Now, some of these are very load-bearing shelves, so I can't actually close them. But it's an old filing cabinet that used to be my mom's. And this is the filing cabinet. I used to actually think it was my grandfather's, but it was actually my mom's. My mother used to be an art teacher, and the lowest shelves, which you can see are just kind of cabinets that open, are where, when I was a kid, that's where Mom kept all of her art supplies that I could just go and get whenever I wanted. So there was like paper and pastels, like proper oil pastels and ink and like real professional grade drawing stuff that she was like, go take it, go for it. Do whatever you want, and so it is now in my studio. After having lived at my parents' house, first up north in Timmins, then in Ottawa, and now outside of Ottawa, and it lived in where they're at now for about 20 years, until my mom was like, "Do you want those?" Because we're getting rid of some stuff because we just got a lot of stuff, and I said, "Yeah. I love those. They're great." And it's a super old cabinet. It's modular. I really liked it. And it's like nice old, off-gas wood. So it's like none of it's not like that IKEA crap where the glue is going to change the color of paper and stuff like that. Right. So anyway, so I get it. It's, they live in a 100-year-old house. It's real drafty. Stuff gets in, whatever. So I move it into my studio, and it fits just like a glove. It's beautiful. I love it. And often back then, I didn't work with this before I had bifocals. I didn't work with my glasses on. And so I had taken a drawer all the way out, and I put it back in. I was doing all that kind of stuff. And I didn't think about it for a few days. And I was working, and I looked down, and I see this brown shape on the floor, and it's on top of a stack of paper. And I'm like, oh, when did I eat a banana in here? Oh, well, I'll throw it out later. And it goes like 3 days, and I think it's just like a desiccated banana skin, right? Because I don't have my glasses on. And then finally one day, I looked down with my glasses on, and I realized it's a mummified bat. There's nothing gross. There's no bugs on it. It hadn't decomposed. It had literally got stuck behind the shelves, and because they're so dry, it basically freeze dried. Like it was just like a dry, mummified bat that had fallen out the back of, and it was stiff. I picked it up. It was, it was like a batarang. But it had fallen out the back of the one of the drawers that I had taken out. And I didn't realize I had a dead bat on the floor of my studio for 3 days. That's how horrible this place is. It's getting cleaned up. I'm doing it slowly.
Well,
but how's that for a metal story?
Yeah, I can't think of a better way to end the podcast, sir. So once again, Tom, thank you so much for having the time, give me the time to come on.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I had a blast. I'll definitely have to ask you back. Later on.
Anytime.
Maybe we'll get a double team with Mike Norton.
Sure. Well, how would you tell who's who?
Well,
I'm handsome.
That'll be the game. That'll be the game. But seriously though, it's been a blast finally sitting down and chatting with you after, stalking you online for so many years. I can't wait to check out Game Masters. It looks like it's going to be an amazing book. Everyone, please go check it out. There'll be links everywhere. Tom, let everyone know now where they can find you online.
I am some combination of Tom Fowler and either Art or Bug or Nothing on every social media platform. So on Blue Sky and Cara, which are the two prime spots where I'm at, where I post artwork nowadays, I'm just plain Tom Fowler. On Instagram, I'm Tom Fowler Art, but I don't post a lot there anymore because of all the AI scraping and whatnot. I'm almost never on Twitter, but there I am, Tom Fowler Bug. And if you really want to find me on Twitter, if you can remember the hashtag Elon comes spiders. I tend to punctuate most of my tweets with that. So again, that's hashtag Elon comes spiders. That's why he's so angry all the time. Yeah. He's got a weird dick, and that's what comes out.
Seems legit.
So yeah, but that's the easiest way to find me. There is Elon comes. No, it's Tom Fowler Bug. Yeah, so I only keep it open so nobody else can take it, and so that I can do press for stuff like this. But for the most part, yeah, if you want to see me actively posting artwork and being my avuncular self, you're looking at Blue Sky and you're looking at Cara. So that's the best place to find it.
All right, I'll make sure everyone has access to those links in the show notes below. Once again, Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you.